welcome back to my channel. Oh, Behind the Star. Guys, it's been so many years. I know. Please forgive me, but you know what? It's 2023. It's a clean slate. I'm starting again. It's the beginning of the year. So I'm finally getting my podcast onto my channel. So guys, I'm back. Officially, I'm back, and I have an incredible guest to kickstart this channel for this year. Guys, I'm not gonna skip anymore. I promise to be consistent. And my guest is gonna keep me very accountable today. But remember to hit that subscribe button, and I'm so happy to have you guys back once again. Now, my guest for today is an incredible veteran when it comes to sports journalism in our industry. Next year, he will be celebrating 26 years in the industry. Guys, I've only been in the industry for 5 years. So there's a lot that I'm learning from him as a veteran and a person who is called the voice of African football when it comes to all things African football on the continent. He is also currently the chairman of SAFJA, which is the South African Football Journalists Association. He is also the South African Sports Journalist of the Year in 2012 and the Journalist of the Year in 2018. Who am I talking about? Velile Mnyandu. Thank you so much for coming on to my podcast. Thank you, my boss, technically. Thank you for coming, Velile.
Thank you. It's my pleasure, Mbali, for me to be here. And this is very important.
Yeah.
You know, it's important that as we move forward in this coverage of sport, and also especially with the space of social media also having taken over, us in the industry, we also take ownership and start to have our own platforms. So it's a very busy day, even for myself today, but I felt the need to come here and support you because it is very important that this podcast resumes.
Yes.
You know, and with a beautiful studio like this, there is no way that you cannot continue. And being consistent as well in telling the story of South African sport, because through what we're doing here, we're not just about pushing Mbali's project, but it's also about telling the stories. It's also about sharing, you know, because I believe that there are a number of young kids, some of them, they have just started this month in the journalism schools around the country. Some are finishing their third years, and they are looking for ideas on what they can do, and it must get into a point that they know if they want to be inspired, they are going to go to Mbali Skiti's podcast, you know, and find encouragement and find inspiration and on what next step to take. So never in your wildest dreams think this is just about yourself only. You know, this is also about pushing the next generation, pushing the other people on the other side who are looking for something, especially those who are not as privileged as us to be in this province here in Gauteng, where everything is there, especially those who will find them in other provinces where they are not really exposed to a lot of things that are happening in the industry, especially when it comes to sports journalism. So for me, and also I think it's a good thing that you've called me here just a day after the World Radio Day. Earlier we spoke about it, and for me it was something very emotional. It's next month, by the way. Next month I'll be finishing 26 years. Next month, yes.
Next month.
Yes, on the 31st of March. You know, and when I look back at the people who helped me to get to where I am today, most of them are no more, or some of them are no more. And it was a veteran that I started to work with back in the days. His name was Omkivi and Klebi, a doyen of radio, especially sports commentary and presenting, and you mentioned all those things. So I have not posted anything about World Radio Day because my World Radio Day is coming on the 31st of next month.
Ah, man. Ladies and gentlemen, that's why he's the chairman. It's only been 5 minutes. I said nothing. But, you know, I'm glad that you touched on the people who actually helped you along the way, you know, and you, because mentorship is actually one of the things that I wanted to touch on. But before we get into it, I really wanted to establish Velile.
Okay.
Because we know Velile the veteran, Velile who's always chasing stories, sometimes controversial, you know, but the authority of African football. We know your work on the African continent, but many people don't know your family life. Many people don't know that Velile is a married man, he's a father. And I wanted to find out just how important that aspect of your life has been for you, and just how difficult was it for you to balance being present and still being that voice of authority and being present in the industry?
Yeah, very difficult, that one. Because I would say that because, and it didn't start now just with my family only. In terms of at home with my wife and my son, but also just growing up, you know. I never had this thing called the teenage stage, where I would go out with my mates, you know, even after school, or you know, go and play, because I've been in radio since I was 15, you know. So I've never had an opportunity to be Velile the kid, you know. So I've always hung around with Abo Baba, I'm a Grootman, you know.
So you were always an old soul.
Yeah. You know, so maybe at some stage I was saying this to my late mom. Hey, you know, I think I missed a lot of stages. You know, because I never had that opportunity. You know, because radio has been my life, or let me just say, sports journalism has been my life since my first year at high school, or even just slightly before high school. You know, because before radio I was writing for a local community newspaper called the Kai Mercury. And then Kai Mercury, when you write for Kai Mercury, you automatically become a reporter for Daily Dispatch. You know, and you know Daily Dispatch, you know. So we're going back as early as 1996, 1997, when it all started, you know. So coming to your question, of how even the day-to-day now with my immediate family, how this is even affecting me. It's not something that started now when I'm married. It's something that I've grown up with as a 15-year-old to the 41 that I'm turning next tomorrow. Turning 41 tomorrow.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So
of course we knew that, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think for me that's how I can best answer the balancing, and I don't want to lie, I'm struggling till today. You know, because most of the time at work they know. In fact, at work, some of my colleagues and even my boss, they would say, "Can you please stop filing at 3 a.m. now?" You know,
I'm the guy.
No. Even working from home, you know, because most of the I don't know. I enjoy operating between 12 and 3. You know, I find that I'm also more productive around that time as well. But also because of the nature of our industry, chasing deadlines, and that is affecting people at home. But I think one thing I can commend my wife for is that they've also learned to adjust their lives around what will also make me comfortable.
Yeah, I have to ask, because now knowing that you basically gave your youth to your craft, and so does this now shape the way you father your son in terms of his 10 now? In terms of how he's going to pursue his dreams? Is it going to be a thing of pursue your dreams early or enjoy your childhood? Because I actually didn't have a childhood at 15. Does this sort of shape your approach to parenthood as well?
Yeah, I think also, you see, when you've been brought up by a single parent as well, you know, because my dad was more in KZN. I was staying with my mom. I grew up under my mom, and so I didn't really have that, you know, when you have your father and your mother every day, I cannot tell you that, and I cannot tell you because I've seen some of my mates and everyone who was around, and they grow up with both parents being here in the house every day, and there's different ways in how they relate two situations. So I've not had that, you know. Me, I would see my father maybe once in 2 months, or, you know, because he was staying in KZN, and then I would visit him, and then he would visit us as well at home. So my son, it's different, you know. We're under the same roof every day. But also the mom is playing more of a role, you know, because of my hectic schedule. But what I've learned is that there are a lot of things, a lot of traits that he's taken from me. I mean, the way he's into football, and and then I was asking him the other day. He's saying, "Dad, I've been exposed to football since age 4." You know.
So does he want to play, or does he want to?
He's already playing. He's already playing. He's playing for Florida, Albion.
Okay.
Yes, and then he's also, in fact, he's been playing for Florida Albion for the past 2 seasons, and then now he's on trialing at Randburg Local Football Association. In fact, the Randburg club. So I think that's where he's headed. So yeah, because and no, he's a very good player. He's a very good player. Left-sided midfield, and also left winger as well. So, but this is just about. But also he likes his rugby as well, and he likes cricket as well.
What would you want for him?
He wants football. He wants football.
So you can write stories about him.
He wants football. I managed to convince him on my local team. So we are fully on the local team. We're together on the local team. And then I managed. Okay, Barcelona. Okay, he's sold on Barcelona as well. But with Arsenal, I struggled. So he's a big Man City fan.
Oh, okay. So I'm a Gunners and Barcelona. So
local teams. I but I love my local team. Yeah, they come first.
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah. You know, before we even get into the career aspect of things, I think one of the big things that happened for you was you're changing your surname. You know, because when I came into the industry, Velile Mnyandu.
Yes.
Now you're Mnyandu. And I mean, it took a while for us to remember, Konje, you know, but now we're so used to it. But I really wanted to speak about, from your perspective, the importance of culture.
Correct.
And doing the right thing.
Correct.
In a day and age where it just seems like our culture is so diluted and many people don't seem to understand why we do things. Why for you was it so important to change the surname, and for reasons that people don't know? Maybe if you can explain reasons why you felt like, you know what, I need to.
Yeah. And this one is a very interesting one because it's very emotional. Yeah. This one, you know, and I did a lot of consultation around it, and some people that I spoke to around the industry, some that are also grew up in the industry, they didn't believe what I was doing. Then they felt like they were talking things like, "What is this going to do to my brand?" And if you notice, I think there was a very long time my WhatsApp status or whatever that was up there on my profile on WhatsApp, it was saying a man's identity is everything, you know, because if the identity of my house is not well intact, it will impact on future generations, and I don't want my son to grow up under that, you know. Because this is very important, and also it also has got to do with how I grew up as well, you know. So I think for me it was important that I take this route, and fortunately, even the process of taking that route was not just a process that started when my mom is no more. My mom was still alive then, and I had her full backing. You know, I had a full backing on this, and because growing up, we've always been talking about these things, you know. And the good thing also is that even though we are staying in the Eastern Cape, myself and my sister, Unontokozo, you know, but KZN, where my family comes from, we've been growing up there as well. You know, spending school holidays with our sisters, with our brothers, with our cousins. You know, also that side in KZN. So the connection was equally strong. I always consider myself, I say I've got the Nguni blood, you know, a Xhosa blood and the Zulu blood, and I'm a proud Zulu. My father is Zulu. You know, you as a man, in fact, you go with your father's side, and you know,
so
and
whose surname?
It's my father's surname. Yes, yes, yes. And my father passed away in 2012. You know, and he's been very much part of my life. You know, growing up in almost everything that I've been doing, my father has always been there. I will take you into 2000, something very special and important. Xakolukwa, you know, Sientabin. You know, my uncles in the Xhosa side, they had to make sure that my father was there, and they asked permission from my father so that they can have access to this body and do what they want to do as Xhosas. Wow. You know, because this body belongs to my father. You understand what I mean? And they respected him, he respected them as well, you know, because Abu Sbalbak, you know. So there's a lot that went into this. And then, fortunately, even here in Gauteng, I also stay with my brothers. I call them my brothers, was my cousins, but you know, and we had been talking about this, and even back home in KZN, and some of our brothers there, even Ekaya, Abakona, we have been talking about this, you know, and I think family support is very important because one of my uncles, who's a cousin to my father, was also the one who made it possible, even for the processing of, how can I put this? The processing of the paper, you know, the paper, the documentation. Yes, the documentation, changing of surname, you know. So when you've got that kind of a support from different sides, it becomes seamless. And I think for me, I can proudly call myself ukuthi today ngumnyandu lo ugugile umashumi inongalaza kanondela umphangongo lo ugedeza lo.
I love it. No, thank you for that, because I think you've really given us quite an authentic insight as to who you are and what actually goes into the making of Velile Mnyandu each and every day, your fiber, your authenticity, and what actually drives you as a person. But we know that the biggest part of who you are and what drives you are the stories that you also break as well. You and I are both journalists, right? But you, of course, have been in print also for quite a long time. And I'm still learning from you and many of the guys in Safja as well. But I need to then ask you then, with the change of journalism over the 20th and the 21st century, and how we consume sports, and or how we just consume even entertainment and music, and how we just engage with content, would you still say that journalism is storytelling, or is it just regurgitating facts, or none of the above?
You know, Bali, I came into the industry in starting in 1997. You know, but maybe I would say maybe that's not true. I started in 1996 writing for the newspaper, you know, Kai Mercury. Then I came in radio early 1997, and especially when I started in radio at CKI, now to FM, they still had this thing, typewriter, you know. And I remember even when they were going to read news, there would be a printout. You know, from Sapa, you know, remember Sapa, you know, at the time. There was no internet.
Yes.
I remember, I think internet in South Africa came late 97.
Towards the end of the 90s.
Yes, maybe early 98. You know, that's when the internet started to come, and then things were slightly changing around that time. So I belong to that generation of being on the ground, you know, find the story. So, you know, Sometimes, I even struggle with the telephone interviews because, because mina ngifuna ukubona emehlweni. And if you pick lang corner, and also even besides just to pick up, but also because when you're on site, there are other things that you get to see, and then they enhance your story. So I think that the way stories are being told, it's different today, but I still find that you can have the both of today's way of doing things and the combination of the old, because the traditional methods for me still bring out the best, but obviously also you have to augment it. And multimedia journalism, it is here, you cannot change it, and it's something that I embraced a long time ago, and it's taken me around the world as well. So I just think that we also need to refrain from mixing or thinking that social media, because now we see a lot of people coming from, especially football journalism in particular, is the biggest. If I'm gonna put it, I think football journalism is a victim of this. We see it even in the press conferences where anyone just think they can be a football journalist.
Yeah.
And
because you watch Chiefs and Pirates.
Exactly, and also because you've got biggest following on social media, or your status just somebody who's just following teams, and then all of a sudden people are just calling you a journalist. A journalist must have seen the inside of a journalism school to be called a journalist, because journalism is also about ethics.
Yes.
It's also about principles. There are critical questions that get asked and also get taught in the journalism school inside just the first 2 weeks of journalism. So if you have not seen the inside of the journalism school, it is not easy for just anyone to be called a journalist. So I think those things become very important. And that's why now at SAFJA we are left with a role to play, because we've seen a number of people, they are passionate about the industry, and maybe they've not done journalism or something related to journalism in terms of media studies and all those other things, or even PR or communication. So because people are there in the space, so we'll have to no choice but to come up with mentorship programs so that you don't lose the talent, because sometimes you find that, and this is not something that is started just now. There are well-established journalists from that generation, who never went to do journalism, and they're the best journalists today. Because they were taught in these. In those newsrooms,
on the job.
On the job, and I've just completed my honors in
journalism.
Yes,
you were at Wits Journalism School.
Yes. So I was doing.
Congratulations.
Yes, journalism and media studies. Hey, that was
congratulations.
But one of the things that I've learned there, because I think that it was journalism A, so I was doing something on the history of South African journalism, and you find that, especially during the days of the apartheid, this was rife also in the black media at the time. The World, starting with the Sowetan, the City Press, the Bantu Press at the time, people who will come into the space without really coming through journalism schools, but once they get inside those newsrooms, because also those newsrooms was not just about journalism only. Remember, the struggle at the time was at its highest form. So there was an agenda that was being pushed of black journalism, but most importantly of liberating the country, and those journalists played a big role in making sure that journalism is taught in the right way in the newsrooms, and I think coming to today, that's one of the roles that we want to play at SAFJA as well, to say, even if you have not seen the inside of the journalism school, but maybe through this mentorship program, this is something we can do, so that at least what we are reporting for the people is coming out of people who know what is expected from them.
Recently, we were at the Safa House recently for because you know what's coming. You know, we always have these off the record conversations, but it was really about the occasion for me, right? I think one thing about me, I've always loved development, right? So anything that's not Premier League, I've always just loved being there. And I think when I was at Soweto TV, it afforded me the opportunity to cover about the Non-Nations Cup, under 12, you know, under 15, Copa Coca-Cola, all these different lower tier divisions. And that's just always tugged at my heartstrings. So when there was that press conference about the launch of the under 15 interprovincial tournament, one, I was very disappointed at the attendance by our journalists. But two, it was also because of what was being launched. I think when you first hear under 15 interprovincial tournament, you think, okay, it's an under 15 tournament, but not realizing that this is actually a catalyst for a groundbreaking under 15 national team.
Correct.
That we've never had in the country. Correct. In a country that we've always crying about the development structures, that there's a big problem in our grassroots, there's a big problem in our development, there's a big problem in terms of the system of progression for players. And because there's this big gap after the Non-Nations Cup on the top, there's this big gap, then you've got players who just pop out 16, not even 16, 18, 19, 20, Diski Challenge. But what's happened to the 5-6 years in between? And so they are sort of trying to address that question about filling that gap. But my thing is, we see, okay, their heart is in the right place, but your smile is saying something else. So for you, is it a matter of finally that we have something in the under 15 division and it's a national team, which is a big gap that we need to fill? Or for you, do you have sort of like different feelings about this particular launch and what Safa's trying to do now?
Starting with the issue of the coverage.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up in the Eastern Cape, and I've been covering sport now, as I've said, for 26 years in this space. The first 11 years of my life, it was dominantly covering amateur sport, you know, in the Eastern Cape. But even though I was based in the Eastern Cape, in the early 2000s, I remember the first Vodacom challenge. So I think I was still at the time, not even 20 at the time. You know, 1999. You know, at the time, and if you look back, I think I was just 18, 17 around that time. I interviewed Dr. Ivan Khoza, I interviewed Dr. Keza Mtaung in the Vodacom Challenge. First Vodacom Challenge, the introduction of Jabu Pule and now Jabu Matlango at the time at Kings Park. If you ask Marans yaingisinda ngibambe so, you know, interviewing them. And at that time, I think I had been in the industry maybe for just 3-4 years, having started in 1997. So I think that when I look back at the time, Mbali, and that first 11 years of my life, covering amateur sport, it shaped my thinking. It shaped my knowledge of the game. And that's why even today, I don't mind. You can even send me to cover under 6, under 9, or even under 15. I will not sulk. I will go, you know, because I find and I know how to turn a story of an under 6, under 9, or even under 15, or even what you would call a minority sporting code. I know how to turn that story into a national or even international story. You know, and even dominate a story that you think you can do of chiefs or pirates, you know. So I always feel that, especially here, when I got here this side, I think around 2008, and I think there's a culture I once chased away. We were at Bafana training at UJ, and I can't remember, I think Coach Shakes was still the coach at the time, and there's this youngster, there was new age at the time, there was a youngster who was doing internship. And he came with one of the reporters, the senior reporters, to the Bafana training. And the under-17 were also in camp at the time. And I was leading the charge to chase the boy away. I said, go to the under-17 training. What do you want here? You know?
Sure.
Because my thinking is that if he can go to the under-17s, those boys are almost his age. They're going to grow up with him. You know, and then when they grow up with him, they are playing for Bafana, they would know about this Mbalis Gedi, who used to go and cover us at under 17. We're almost the same age, and there's better understanding. You know, even in terms of the stories, they'll be getting better stories in that. So I find that kind of guidance, the guidance is there's a missing element that we have there. And for me, it's unfortunate that when there are activities or there are events of certain generation are not being covered, when there are young journalists who are in the space, and these are the things that they need to prioritize. And sometimes I feel like, okay, maybe you can say you don't blame them because somebody must show them the way from the newsrooms where they are coming from. But I also challenge them to say you must, because I also did it. No one was, you know, because also for me, I will say it, for the better part of my space in the industry, I've never really had someone who's been looking over me, like, you know, guiding me in terms of the editor role, you know, because I think I've been in the space for a very long time, you know, to an extent that most of the things that I'm doing are self-taught. You know, I've learned through the industry, and because I've been covering the game and I know how to do it. I've covered school sport at all levels, from local level, from regional level, to provincial, to national. I've covered school sports there. I've covered development in all its forms, in all different sporting codes. My mate, Luxolo September, he found me at the Walter Sisulu University doing journalism in 2003. I had just started in 2002, and he was a very young boy when he came, and he will tell you that on Friday we would be, or maybe on Thursday, we would be at Bora Buffalo Park cricket grounds. Bora Bears would be playing professional cricket. On Friday we would be maybe there will be boxing on Friday at Orient Theatre, professional boxing. On Saturday, we would be at a Bushbucks match, a professional football match in the PSL, or even maybe if rugby on Saturday, and then Sunday is Bushbucks playing. You know, so what is this telling you? We've covered 4 professional sporting codes in one weekend. You know. And also even the amateur element would also be there. There was a time, even Luxolo, I think he won, because Luxolo, he left journalism at only age 22. But by that time, when he left at age 22 to go and work for FIFA, he had won a number of national journalism awards. He was a leading football writer at the Daily Dispatch and also appearing in Sunday Times, you know. So that is the culture that we come back from. And that thing is missing. So when I go to that kind of a story that we attended last week, and I don't see journalists, especially young journalists, and this is something that is talking to that space, I feel bad, you know. I feel bad. But most importantly for me, I am there because I know the company that I'm working for. I grew up at the SABC. In all the 26 years I'm talking about, my station, True FM today, is a station that falls under SABC. So that culture, I know the role that SABC is supposed to play in the society, you know, and I know that when besides just because that Safa is a is a partner to SABC, but Safa is also found in each and every corner of this country, just like SABC. You know, we broadcast to more than 30 million people every week. You know, so if as SABC we are not present in a press conference like this, for the information that needs to be disseminated and improve football in all different corners of the country, then who's going to do it?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So those things become important for me. And so...
Yeah.
And I know that sometimes people are saying, but you've been long in that. Why are you bothering to be in something of the under-15s? But we've got a role to play, you know.
I must ask you, because I think Morocco has really set a precedent on our continent. Besides their exploits at the World Cup, but we see what they're doing from under 17 level, at the Chan level as well. Do you think that, because one of the discussions that were raised at the press conference, Lapaya, was the TD saying, no, sometimes we've got players, good national team, and you made the example in Malawi where the under-17 player was pulled out because the team, Yagu PSL, was like, no, this player must be pulled out. And I remember even asking the question, which is, surely a national team should take precedence over, Premier League teams, even though they are the ones who are paying them. But my question then is, Guti, what is Morocco doing that we are not? And how can we then get Safa and PSL to sort of see eye to eye and sort of build towards a common vision of building a stronger national team?
Yeah, I think there are different areas of this engagement, you know, and firstly starting directly with the Morocco one. The Morocco one is also the issue of funding, you know, and it's a story that I've been following. And in fact, very soon I'll also be filing something around it as well, because I was even engaging a Safa Vice President, Mr. Linda Zwane, about it, because also he's the SASCOC board member as well.
Yes.
And I was also talking to the SASCOC president himself, Mr. Barry Hendricks, just the way sport is being funded in this country. You know that I think the government is only giving Safa about 2 million rands a month, annually. You know, how do you run 54 regions in this country, 341 LFAs, just from that. And if you look at what is happening in Morocco, the prime minister there, or even the king, you know, is very much involved. And also in big everything. In fact, Mr. Fawzi Lekja, the FA president, Royal Moroccan Football Federation, is the finance minister in Morocco. You know, and also if you check around the country, in fact around the continent, especially football, because football is the biggest sporting code, it's fully funded by government. You know, and here it's a different model altogether, also because there are sponsorships here, but I don't think to that level. So the funding element is central to this, but also I think besides just the funding element, how the FA operates also needs to be reviewed. You know, because I still feel that there was a time, for instance, you talk about the junior national teams. There was a time, if you remember, and this is something that the new TD, Walter Steenberg, is also talking about now, that they need to have all the junior national team coaches to be permanent. When we last qualified to go to the under-15, in fact, to the under-17 World Cup in 2015 with coach Mulefin Tseke, he was permanent. The back-to-back under-20 qualifications with Thabo Senong, he was permanent.
Yes.
The Olympic qualification with the ODG, you know, he was also permanent. So that area is non-negotiable. But I think there's something that at Safa for a very long time, and to zoom in into your question now, and I've always been consistent with this, that the biggest problem we have between Safa and the PSL is that both organizations have been lacking leadership in the technical space. You know, PSL commercially very good league. You know, and I think it's there for everyone to see what Dr. Ivan Koza with Dr. Keza Mtaung, Mama Tomadlala, and even those who were there before, the founding members from 1996, you know, of the rebranded PSL. They've done very well in the space. But technically, I cannot tell you what the PSL is doing to improve the football on the ground. You know, you expect a big league like the PSL to have something that is called like a technical study group. When it's midway, half the season, end of the season, they review in terms of the trends, how is football being played here, and the fact that we have a coach just this past weekend, even if that coach had a work permit, but he cannot sit on the bench in the CAF match because he doesn't have a CAF A license. But come this weekend or the following weekend when the PSL match is
on the bench.
Is on the bench. You know, so those are the things, especially when if you go to our neighbors in Botswana or even in Mozambique or even in Zambia. Those coaching standards are there. You know, the fact that today at Safa, you know, we cannot have Mbali. At Safa today, we've got people who've been waiting for their B licenses and their A licenses, coaching licenses, that is, for more than 5 years because Safa is not conforming to the convention standards, you know, of CAF. Arguably the biggest FA in this part of the land, in terms of the Kosafa region, issuing asemva by countries like Botswana and Lesotho because they are not meeting this convention. So it tells you that we've been lacking technical leadership and technical vision. You know, so these things inform the quality of football on the pitch. You know, so these are the things that we seriously need to work hard to improve, and I think the new TD and his team, they are working and all those things, and the time is against them because we've also not been qualifying for very important tournaments, and they have to make sure that they solve these things.
I have probably about 3 questions left. Our time is running out now, but I'll keep it to 2. I love that you speak on leadership. You recently wrote an article about the crisis about our referees and that there's a crisis of leadership there. And you're talking about leadership as well from the PSL. You're talking about leadership from a Safa perspective as well. Knowing all of this, what does leadership mean to you in a world that lacks a lot of it and is in need of it? When you, Velile, when you look at your journey in the industry, your 26 years, what you've seen, how the media landscape has grown, how you've contributed both on print, on radio, on TV, and how you've just cemented yourself on the African continent. Knowing what you know now, how would you then describe leadership to someone who's younger than you?
And I know that because sometimes these things, when we talk about leadership, they get confused, and we must clarify that we are talking about technical leadership and vision.
Yes.
Not to say that leadership is lacking at Safa and PSL, but we're saying in the technical space, not much has been done or is being done. You know, and that technical leadership, that's why I don't even want to get into the relationship between the PSL and Safa, because if those two bodies had good technical leadership and vision, then we wouldn't be having these challenges that we're talking about. But I think going back to your question about leadership, and it is also one of the reasons why ourselves at SAFCHA, even as a small group that we started with at the time, because I remember back in 2010, and this is when we also get to see AIPS. You know, because our first time I received and you know, even correspondence for them was around 2010, because one of the seniors at the time, may his soul rest in peace, Uprasbu Mseleko, we met up with some people from the AIPS, and I remember Kwana Muabelo was also there as well. And Kwana used to tell us that in the past, and also a number of people, even PBK, who's also very close to me, used to tell me that they had an organization that they have tried to form in the past of football journalists, but it wouldn't last that long. You know, I remember, I think Tim Molobi told me that at most maybe it would go for 4 to 5 months, and then it would just disappear. You know, and in the past we've tried to resuscitate it, you know.
Yeah.
And also I think at some stage it was myself, Bramatselane, Mazola Mlefi, and also Mosibudi, Whitehead as well.
Yeah.
You know, and we failed to do that. And then right in the middle of COVID, you know, because we had a group that we had organized ourselves as just football journalists around the country. Maybe 23, 24 of us were in that group. And COVID came, and it was tough for us, you know. So we had to find ways of how do we get content, because you know, remember that stage 5. You know,
Yeah.
and wasifuna ukusebenza as well.
Yeah.
And it was a difficult period for me, because also I lost a huge chunk of my income because my department at SABC closed at the time, you know. So I had to find different ways of how do I become relevant in the industry, you know. And leadership at that time, we saw the way of how we can get ourselves together, and we formed the organization in 2020. Right in the middle of COVID. I think we were in stage 4 when we officially set it up, or we're still in stage 5. And the organization has grown into what it is now. More than 150 members in all the provinces around the country, and we continue to grow. We've got a good partnership with Hollywood Bets, and there's more opportunities. Next month, we'll be crowning our third SAFJA Women's Football of the season, and I confirm to you that the prize money will also be increasing. We've got grand plans for this year. If things go our way, the way we're planning, we could be sending a journalist to the FIFA Women's World Cup. Over the past two past 2 years, we've crowned a SAFJA Football Journalist of the Year.
Yes.
And those football journalists have been to watch WAFCON matches in Morocco. Another journalist, Matselana Mamabolo, went to watch France against Bafana. Last year it was Lawrence Koller, went to cover WAFCON. So, and because also the reason why we want our journalists to go and cover football on the continent, that tradition must continue, because especially in football journalism, we are faced with the challenges where most of our colleagues cannot travel on the continent because the budgets in the newsrooms have shrunk. So media houses cannot afford that. But it doesn't mean that we cannot make means, because we must get our journalists used to operate in that space and be proud of their continent. And if there's one thing that is different that you will not see in South Africa, is to see back pages in this country full of English football, full of Italian football or Spanish La Liga. When you open our newspapers, you will see local content, and that is not happening in East Africa. I remember I spoke to a very prominent football administrator. I will not mention his name, and he was telling me that he used to work a lot in that space, and they would go to East Africa and they will find the countries there. The content is just English football. In fact, they would even go to an extent where they change the kickoff of the time in the afternoon to accommodate a Chelsea Arsenal game over the local game. Here in the country, you don't see that, and that's why, as football journalists, we must guard the space jealously, because also this space has been very good to us. It has made us to be able to feed our families and even to start our own establishments in terms of businesses around the game. So as much as sometimes we are seen as being too critical of the space, but we must also criticize in a way that it doesn't damage the sport. You know, we must also know that tomorrow there must also be another opportunity for Omnyu Mbali and for Omnyu Velile to come into the space and still come and benefit from it in the most positive way.
Before I let you go, last question. Ngiyacela ningise New Zealand, Australia. Ngiyacela chairman. Ngiyacela ningise Women's World Cup.
The panel will decide.
No, certainly they will. No, I have to ask this question because I need a male's perspective on this. So recently, just last week, we were attending the UEFA Assist program, which was focused on women's leadership. And it was great because we got people from UEFA and it was training. And I think there was only 2 of us from the media, me and Bumi Manyisi. But most of the people were football administrators, coaches, players, people from Safa, from all over the country and all of that. I need to ask in terms of from a male's perspective, we're always talking about women empowerment, we're always talking about women coming into the space. But a lot of the things that have also been raised from the women is that we have this thing called pull me down syndrome. As women who already are few in the space, we say we want to empower each other. But what we say in theory and in practice, sometimes they don't correlate. From your male's perspective, do you think that women struggle sometimes to support each other when you just look at women in this industry? And the ones looking at the fact, would see how many of them actually come and support women's football or press conferences or women's sports generally?
Yeah. One thing, I'm not going to delve much
Yeah.
in terms of how women support each other.
Yeah.
But I'm also going to say that sometimes I feel slightly disappointed that women are not doing enough. I can tell you the number of female football journalists who are consistently covering Hollywood bets, Super League matches on the ground, being there in the country. If I want to, in fact, maybe let's say in the space that I've seen them, I will struggle to reach the other hand.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of counting. And I think this is something that also at SAFJA we need really to drive, you know, and because I think we need to do better, you know, and not to say, because for me, I mean, I've been covering women's football in the Eastern Cape, I think since the early 2000s, you know, and I feel that seriously, I also grew up in a generation, even when I came this side, I would know there would be Ntombe Moleme, there would be Konosisi or Eliabon, I think Linda Khulash or something. There was also Linda Moretsane as well, and we would see Abubusi Mukwena as well. And they would go to the stadium and cover the PSL, you know, file match reports and all those things, you know. When you look today, you go to the stadium, you see very few females, you know, operating in the space that I'm telling you about, you know. There are still those that do it, and even in other areas, even outside Gauteng as well. But I would still like to see that number growing, and I think for me it goes back, this issue of coverage for females or women is not in isolation to what we're talking about with young journalists, you know, and we need to treat it almost in a similar way, and make sure that on the side of the mentorship, especially those who are in the newsrooms, they go hard on it, you know. And I think the challenge to every female sports journalist or female, you know, you look at someone like Kes Naidu, you know, when she came into the industry, you know, and you look at her now, she is an authority
in cricket,
the space,
yes,
you know. She's not just an authority on holding the mic and being in front of the camera, but you listen to the content, you know, you listen to the technicalities of the sport when she's engaging on it, you know. And that's the kind of, you know, I work a lot on the continent with Asha Kumugisha, you know, and you see how she operates even on the international space. You listen to her talking about the game, you know, and these are the kind of reporters, you know, and I'm biased because I've worked with her for the past 4 to 5 years at SABC as well, and now even at Itiski. She is my type of female sports football reporter, you know, the way she goes out to get her stories, and maybe I'm biased because I've played a strong mentorship role in that space.
Velile, thank you so much for coming. I know, like, we could unpack so much, but I know that you've got deadlines and everything, but I just appreciate you coming. Happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you.
From
Thank
us
you. Thank you.
behind Behind the star, please give Mrs. We know you didn't buy her flowers, but please tell her she is our everyday Valentine's. Chocolate.
Baby, this is yours, eh? This is yours. This is yours.
Happy Valentine's Day to Mrs. Thank you so much, Velile, and all the best. Congratulations on 26 years in the industry next month.
Yes.
And I know next year you're also celebrating a big milestone. 10 years being married, so congratulations, and we look forward to your exploits this year.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. Till next time, cheers, bye.
Bye.